good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Shout out Pakistan is in the house as well. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Denmark is also here. Thank you, Denmark. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, or your dinner time if you're international. And special thanks to our wonderful sponsor today, IP Rally, our fantastic presenter, Andreas Cylinder, who is going to teach us GenAI IP use cases for in-house counsel. And he's going to talk about how AI tools are revolutionizing IP workflows. This is our 103rd webinar of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time, or have you tuned into an IHC webinar before? We're thrilled to have Andreas Cylinder with us today. Since 2005, Andreas has been working as a consultant and in different commercial and/or leadership roles regionally and globally. He's worked at companies like Thomson Reuters, Clarivate, and PatSnap before joining IP Rally as Chief Commercial Officer to build a commercial strategy and organization. Andreas has an LLM focused on intellectual property and contract law from the University of Lund, as well as an additional education in IP strategy and management, media, and antitrust law. Thrilled to have Andreas here. Very excited to learn more about IP Rally and the state of AI in IP. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Andreas to get us started.
Yeah, so the only missing piece of that introduction, I think, is potentially the fact that I'm Swedish. My university may have given that away, but also Shai's pronunciation of my last name, which he's been practicing, may have helped. But yeah, no, really excited to get this opportunity to speak with you today. Can't say that I love speaking into a screen for 60 minutes. So we'll see if we can pause for some questions, or Shai, if you collect any questions or see anything, feel free to interrupt me. I'm probably not going to be able to monitor the chat, but let's give it a go. So yeah, what we're going to try to cover today is essentially what you're looking at here. So do a very brief introduction, and not really an introduction to myself. Obviously, we have already done that, and not really an in-depth introduction to IP Rally either. I will talk a little bit about IP Rally, but only from the perspective of explaining who we are and what a typical AI company does and how we would structure the way that we see the world. I think that is really important when we get to the main part of this section or this session. We'll jump in and talk a little bit about the current state of play and why we're looking at AI, how far we are with AI adoption, and what some of the hurdles may be to AI adoption. But the main part is an attempt, at least, to make it really tactical and give you a bit of a checklist for how you can assess and evaluate whether an AI solution is right for you. So that's the ambition here, and I'm hoping we will be able to get through at least most of it. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So very quick introduction. IP Rally is essentially, it's a Finnish company, so that may explain some of the Finnish people you have in the chat and on the session in general. We're founded in Finland and have essentially people all over Europe and in the US at the moment. So grown very quickly, but we are aiming to provide effortless access to patent information. And we have some altruistic goals associated with that as well. Try to advance the quality of IP rights and really accelerate innovation in the way that our society is developing. What makes us unique, I think, is that we are an AI first company, and we develop AI applications that are 100% purpose built for patent, in our case, patent processes. Our slogan is, one of our slogans is that we develop AI that thinks like a patent professional. So we're trying to solve some pretty big problems by developing these type of AI solutions. And we don't just, when we talk about AI, we tend to bundle everything together and just say that, okay, artificial intelligence is a solution. That's not really what it is. It's a number of different solutions. And in order to be effective and come up with solutions for customers that are impactful, you need to look at the combination of them. And you, as consumers of this, also need to understand what type of AI you're looking at so that you can assess if it's right for you and if it's secure and all of those things. So we have a platform, and what we're trying to solve on a tactical level for customers is we're trying to enable people to search for information a lot faster and a lot more effectively than they have in the past. We're enabling customers to monitor technology domains and competitors really effectively with qualitative elements that may not have been possible before, using artificial intelligence again. And we're allowing people to review patents substantially faster than what you could do just a year ago. You can now extract 3 patents in a set of 1,000 that cover exactly what it is that you want to see, which is a giant leap forward, I would say. We also do classification and collaboration for different reasons, and all of this combined is providing quite a lot of value to a lot of customers at the point. So final slide about IP Rally. I mentioned previously as well, we are not just talking about AI as a homogeneous solution. We're talking about AI as multiple different components that will then emanate into a solution, and eventually hope that we stop talking about AI and we just talk about the solution for the specific problem that we have. But right now, I think is quite important. So we use multiple different things on top of traditional technology. We have Boolean and things like that as well. But we work with one component that is called knowledge graphs that allows us to decipher, describe, and vectorize and structure information in a way that allows you to search much more granularly and faster, and it allows you to find information a lot faster. And then we build graph neural networks that are attempting to mimic and learn how certain patent professionals will behave, right? So if we're trying to get it to mimic a patent examiner, so we feed it technical understanding, but also an understanding of how someone would assess technical proximity for fighting prior art. And then we combine that with large language models for patent review in particular, but also for some searching elements. So the bundle of all of this and how you combine it is really what makes the future of AI exciting. With that, just going over and talking a little bit about the current state of where we are and reflect a little bit about the patent industry and also a little bit about how far we've come when it comes to adopting AI for different problems. So if we start by looking at the why. So why are we even talking about artificial intelligence in patents? We wouldn't be if everything was working the way that we wanted it to. We can start by looking at just the sheer amount of information and the information overload that we're all facing, not just with patents, but looking at patents in particular. We are seeing record growth in new patent applications every year. And obviously that is adding to the existing corpus of patents and potential prior art that we all have to deal with. So it's really hard to keep up, and industries are also blending and technology is becoming more complicated. So it's challenging. And on top of that as well, you have Asia, and China in particular is filing more than half of these patents, and 2/3 come out of the top 3 Asian authorities, where local companies are becoming a lot more prevalent. There are some challenges here, and it's hard to keep up, but it's not impossible using some of the new technology. Secondly, could also argue that there are some quality issues here, and we can talk about inefficiencies and whether we are wasting resources in different ways. And if you imagine that or consider that almost 50% of all applications are eventually either abandoned or the majority of them are rejected, I kind of wonder why that is, if we could do something differently and use technology to help with that. Many reasons for it, obviously, but for sure, it's something that highlights the current state of play that we're in here. Further, would also argue that we are operating in a lot of uncertainty, and also that we are faced with adversity in ways that we haven't seen before. There has been an increase in patent litigation of about 14% in the last 12 months. And if you look at PTAB proceedings and things like that, it's also going up. I think the biggest challenge with that is that it's really unpredictable to determine and guess the outcomes of that. If there's ways that we can stay abreast of things and avoid ending up in that situation, is well worth it. And finally, I think speaking to quality maybe again and predictability, about 8% of the patents, or if you flip it around, 92% of the patents that are being challenged in some shape or form survive with no changes. So that means that we're looking at a number of different patents out there that are published and granted, and until they've been tested, we don't actually know if they're covering what they're supposed to be covering. So to me, these are some really big challenges that we're facing, and we need to figure out how to deal with them. So we can assume that artificial intelligence and technology will help with a lot of it. Pretty sure most of you on this call are using or have tried AI, and you're both impressed and maybe a little bit worried and a little bit scared. And I think that applies to all of us, but AI and technology is very capable at this point. So just some illustrations on that and where we are in our journey towards adopting and actually starting to realize some of these benefits. Goldman Sachs did a survey a while back that anticipated that about 44% of the tasks that we're facing in the legal space could be more or less automated. And that's looking at the current state of artificial intelligence, not really looking at where technology is going, because we don't know that. But right now, 44% of what we do on a day-to-day basis could be automated. So the question is, do we want to? And if not, why not? So secondly, 82% of law firms are currently either using AI in what they do, or they are in the process of adopting it. And it's about 50-50 between them. So 40% have adopted, 40% are in the process of adopting, according to another survey. 88% are of corporate IP departments. So I guess that's you on this call, say that AI can and will improve their processes. And I would assume that they're also in the process of adopting it. And I would also wonder what the other 12% in that equation is thinking about. Need to get on board, I think. But it is showing that there's a lot of will and people want to start using IP Rally, that too, but artificial intelligence. And finally, a lot of the institutions that we see and that are spinning what we do are now looking at adopting and using artificial intelligence. So I see you coming on screen, Shai. So is there a question? Or...
Yeah, there's a question. Where is this data sourced from? Is it article?
So when we...
Is it like anecdotal?
Yeah, we have. I can share all the links to the actual surveys when we share the report afterwards, or when we share the presentation. So they're all coming from, like I said, I mentioned Goldman Sachs. There are some surveys by LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, and in the following slides, we're actually sharing some of our data as well. We'll share all of it.
Great.
Cool. Yeah, just looking very quickly at, we've done our own mini survey as well, and we want to understand where our customers are in their adoption and what they want to be able to do with this type of technology moving forward. And it may be a little bit biased, obviously, because we have a customer base that is already using it, but I think it's pretty clear here. But if you look at some of this data, about 95% of the people in our survey are using some sort of AI in their everyday. And maybe different types of AI. Some is very specific, so our tool, for example, but some is also very general. So they use ChatGPT or Claude or some of the other generative AI tools out there. And what they're using it for is mainly, and this is probably where it becomes a little bit biased, but I also think it reflects where the lowest hanging fruit for automation and improvement are. So using it for patent search and review, they're using it for patent analytics and patent classification and things like that. There's a lot of talk about patent drafting. We don't really see that has been fully implemented yet, but I'm pretty sure that will come. It's not something we do, but it's a big area here. And the last part here is, what are they, if they are using, 95% of everyone in that survey are using AI, how much are they actually using it? Which makes it a little bit more interesting. Is it like once a week or once a year? It hasn't really been defined. This is asking the question, how often do they use it? And the vast majority are using it, almost half of them are using it less than 10% of the time. If you look at the left-hand side, that's for any type of AI, including graph neural networks and things like the things that we produce. And the right-hand side is looking at generative AI specifically. Slightly more skepticism maybe on the generative AI side, which could be explained by some hesitance around security and hallucinations and things like that. That's really what we're going to be talking about now. This is hopefully setting the stage a little bit about why we're doing this. But we threw the responses from our survey into Claude, which is our AI friend, and it generated the very astute assessment at the bottom of this slide. So the promises of AI, it will help fix this. So let's just do it. But there are a bunch of questions that we need to overcome. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the next, hopefully half hour. Any questions, Shai, before I move into the next section?
No, just one observation. Using AI can be as simple as using Grammarly when drafting a document. Stats can be deceiving. Thank you, Raymond. Totally agree. And you alluded to that, but no questions just yet.
Okay, good. Good. So let's jump into it. This is the main part, and it's very ambitious. There's a lot of information in here, and we will only scratch the surface, I think. But I wanted to mention as well that we will be sharing more detailed and comprehensive guides and checklists and playbooks around this, and we'll make it available on our website, and we're more than happy to share that with everyone on the call. So this is just a very big initial introduction to allow you to see some of the things that we see our customers going through when they're trying to assess this, and maybe a couple of suggestions from our side as well. If we're looking at a tactical checklist of how do you assess whether AI is a good solution for you? Does it provide the right type of quality? Does it improve it? Are you actually getting return on investment on it? You will have to pay something for it in most cases. Sometimes you pay with sacrificed privacy and sharing information, but most of the time you will pay some dollars to someone that is providing it to you. But can you quantify the ROI? Data security is obviously huge, both from a trust perspective, but also from a data security perspective and compliance perspective. So it needs to be considered. And then I think one thing that is quite often overlooked is the adoption factor that we're talking about. And we'll look at AI doesn't really have an impact if people aren't going to use it. So can you assess that as well? So very tangible checklist. And if we start by going into the quality and capabilities part of this, we can just start by looking at the four main types of quality assessments that we see our customers doing. And this is true for obviously our offering, so patent searching, classification, and so on. But you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to patent drafting tools or office action response tools or whatever it may be. The first part, and this is on a sliding scale of complexity, I think. The first part is the eye test. And I would say that this is a screening test more than anything else, but you would also be surprised how many stop at this and just say that, yeah, this was cool. I like it. I think the very first thing you should do is to just run a couple of different examples. Doesn't have to be real live cases. It's just quick tests, right? So do you have some rough descriptions that can generate an invention, the patent draft or patent application? Do you have something you want to run a prior art search on that? You mentioned disclosure that you used. Just see, are the results within the ballpark and reasonable, right? Most of the time, hopefully at this point, they will be, but there are examples of when they're not, right? So just a very quick eye test, whether you want to proceed with more deep analysis and include someone in a project, for example, to adopt or acquire AI. Run some basic tests, see if it falls in what you expect. And just a dumb and silly example, most of you have probably seen this already, but it is an example that is not from patent space, but there are really strong capabilities in AI and large language models and generative AI, but there are also limitations. And if you look at this, you can ask ChatGPT how many R's there are in the word strawberry. It will tell you 2, and it will be pretty confident that 2 is the answer, but we know it's not. So if you can see things like this, you can either say that this doesn't work, it's really bad, or you can try to understand why that is and adopt what it is that you want to do. So quality, capabilities, eye test. That's the first step. Second part is still very subjective, right? But I would say it's going a step further and providing some real life value to you. So if you run some real life examples, again, if you need some patent applications drafted, or if you need to run a prior art search for whatever reason, do that and work through it the way that you would work through it in your traditional tools, and see if you get the same results. Do you get them with lower effort? Are the results the same? Are they better? Are they worse? Why is that? And most importantly in this case, yeah, do you get the results you needed? And how long did it take you compared to the other ones? So similar to the eye test, but it is actually using some real life matters. And in our case, we have customers that will go through this and they will find prior art that they've been looking for a year prior, just because the AI will have different methods of finding information compared to what traditional resources. One thing that I would say though is I would recommend to be somewhat scientific about how you approach it. Try to keep track of things. How long did it take you? What kind of results are you getting back? And if you're comparing it to other solutions as well, so you have 2 or 3 different AI-based solutions, being scientific about it or tracking data is going to allow you to compare the results between the different providers too. So very generic suggestions, but I think quite useful. And then still staying subjective, but maybe taking it up a notch on the science scale, or the validity scale or validation scale. Doing regression testing and looking at data that you already have is a very effective way to validate whether the AI can provide value over what you've already done, and also comparing different types of AI solutions against each other. How effective are they in finding the information you expect to have? So run some analysis, push your search cases, for example, through the AI to see if you get the same results that you got in the search report that you have, or the third-party analysis you got. Do you have a set of patent applications that you've already drafted? If you push them in to an AI drafting tool, how far off would that solution be? Would that result be from what you eventually filed? A number of things you can do, right? But the main point is try to figure out some representative examples and go back and compare what AI will do. And the one thing you should probably consider here is obviously, 1, do you get the results you need? 2, how long did it take you? And if you don't get the results that you expected immediately, how long would you have to work with the AI solution in addition to the immediate results to get to where you need to, which is usually faster. And then the bonus part here is that AI will have a different angle in many different application areas. So it will likely find information that wasn't found in the original one. So could it be that the AI actually finds better information or produces even better scope for the patent than what you actually ended up with? So doing that will allow you to both compare solutions and compare to the status quo, if that makes sense. And then finally, 4th part is the objective part. Had to have something but objective in here as well. But this is a little bit harder than it should be, I would argue. I think there should be benchmarks and data sets and KPIs and quality metrics that should allow you as users and consumers of this to benchmark the different solutions that are out there. Sad part is that there isn't. So I think you have a lot of power as users of these tools to request that. And I think that if you can find a way to use objective sort of criteria or objective data sets or objective whatever it may be to run it against all different types of solutions, you could find really effective benchmarks to do this. For large language models, there are a bunch of different validation and data sets or leaderboards, even Glue and Superglue and Lambda and what have you, but it's nothing for patent information. They used to be, but not anymore, I think. So try to do that. Try to define gold standard data sets or use information that you can find objectively. So I'll share a couple of examples of what that could look like, and I will use some of ours. So here's how IP Rally would measure the quality of our algorithms and how they develop over time, and whether development and changes that we make help and make sense, right? When you look at search, you tend to look at recall and precision statistics. How many documents do you find, and do you find the relevant documents? And then you can look at that in, okay, in a specific way of searching and in a specific search result, how far down the list will we find the relevant references? So for example, in this case, you can see top 50 recall, which is something to T50R, will tell you that, okay, we measure, for example, cited documents that we use to train the documents. Do we find them in, or to train the models? Do we find them in the data sets? And where are we finding them? And if it's in the top 50, looking at this slide, means that we find about, what does it say? Yeah, maybe 45% of documents in top 50. So this should be available from all providers. And not sure it is, but we're more than happy to share it. And same thing here, you can do it a little bit deeper. So you can use other data sets. We've done some projects on analyzing where and how do we find results using, again, different methods for PTAB cases, patents that have been challenged and prior art that have been assessed against that. And you can very quickly get a good picture of how and where do we find the information and why do we find it or don't. Go ahead and ask your providers for that type of information if you think it's useful. I think it is. So quality and capabilities, bonus tips, suggestions, you can read through this now and later, but I think what I just said about transparency is pretty key, and finding the way to assess things from your use case and for what it is that you're trying to achieve is the key here. I think there's also some shortcuts that you can consider. There are a lot of review sites and communities out there that you can go out and try to find information on, Capterra and G2 and some of the other parts. What are they saying, and what are some of the people that you trust saying about things? So do your own analysis, but also trust the wider group of experts in our space. That's about it for this part. Return on investment, assuming that all the quality is there, assuming there's data security, and assuming that everything is looking nice. In our experience as software vendor, it usually comes down to price. And I think we need to snap out of it a little bit. Maybe you shouldn't trust me when I say that, but my reflection is that AI is truly revolutionary in what it does. And of course, price is relevant, but we should really be looking at the sort of the cost benefit ratio and the returns you can expect to get from implementing and adopting AI tools. So there are huge returns. You can measure it in different ways. But again, this is from a survey that was done. We'll share the link afterwards. But for the most part in the legal space, an average return of about 350%, or 3.5 times the money is delivered in just the first year. There are some that are going up way above that, and probably some that are going slightly lower, but there's no question that it's providing a lot of ROI if you find the solution that you need. So going into that a little bit, can start thinking a little bit about what the promise of AI is. And these are the AI generated robots that I did last night. I'm not sure if they fit in here, but let's go through it and see. So artificial intelligence, the way that I see it, brings a couple of different things. So it brings efficiency for sure, right? It probably brings effectiveness as well. So finding the information you need, for example, finding it better and more accurately than before. But the part that is usually missed is the enablement part. We're talking about efficiency gains and effectiveness, and when we measure ROI, that's where we get stuck. But the bigger picture to me is what AI does and how it enables adopters of AI to do things they haven't done before, right? Can you obviously save time? It's something you measure. Can you reduce your cost? Is also linking up to the first two here. But then if you're unable to do something you haven't been able to do before, and that opens up new opportunities or reduces risk in a way that hasn't really been possible, how do you measure that? It's not that easy, but I think it does have a place here. And if we look at the next step here, we can go into it and look at time savings, reduce cost, reduce risk, increased opportunity and insight. So this is probably the easiest one today. Maybe the eye test was easy as well, but time savings is really tangible, right? It used to take you 10 hours to do something. Now it takes you 1 hour. What is that worth? And how often do you do something? And track and try to anticipate what the impact is, and then just apply a simple formula to it to see what the impact is. How much time do you save in a project? How many projects do you do? And what is the monetary value of each time unit, right? There's obviously, I'm not mentioning that here, there's obviously cost of implementation and adoption and things like that needs to be considered here, but just looking at the actual ROI and the benefits, this is a very straightforward calculation that I would suggest that everyone does, just to get some contrast. I may actually have lied when I said that time savings was the easiest one. Reduce cost is also very easy, at least on the surface. So can you now replace something that has been obsolete? You have software that is taking 10 hours to do something and now it's taking 1. Is this cheaper, or is AI solution cheaper or not? Simple math. Big thing here is what you pay for services by a third party. So if you outsource searches or doing all drafting out with outside counsel, things like that, can you bring some of that in-house? What's the value of that to you? And then I think when it gets a little bit more complicated is when we're talking about sort of intangible costs. Are you able to maybe file a fewer patents or get a higher grant ratio or be more selective because you can now get more information, make better decisions around patentability, for example? And is that a cost saving that you can take in there as well? But yeah, very straightforward. Time savings and reduced costs are the efficiency and effectiveness parts to this. Thirdly, looking at time here as well, reduce risk quickly. This is, like I said, it's getting a little bit more complicated. And obviously what the risk is depends on what the solution is, and it depends on what it is that you're trying to solve. I think just assessing and trying to isolate what the obvious risk is that the AI can help reduce is really key. And then try to quantify what the impact of AI is. Can move the needle 1%, 0.1%, 3%, whatever it may be. And then finally, what is the cost if that risk actually becomes reality? What is the cost of you infringing? What is the cost of ending up in $100 million lawsuit? And then try to make that calculation.
If you can shed light on the pace of development and improvement of GenAI solutions in the life sciences space or bio and chemical arts.
So I'm probably not the right person to do that, to be honest. There's a GenAI development in many different areas, but we're not really focused on it. We're focused on IP and patents, which covers those spaces, but I would not venture out and claim to be an expert in that field. Yeah. Cool. So moving on, finally, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this either, looking at the time here, but the final part that I think is, again, could be quite difficult to assess, but it's linking back to what I was saying about being able to do things you weren't previously able to do. If you adopt an AI solution that can, for example, help you identify a company that is filing patents and emerging as someone that is developing new technology where you have a gap, what's the value of you being able to find those and acquire them and get the market share for that? Those things used to take a lot of resource and effort, and now you can use AI to do that, for example. But yeah, to me, I think this is a nice summary, which I came up with. But just to loop it back, I think AI helps experts be better, which is the efficiency and effectiveness, and it helps novices to be experts. Bear that in mind, and it also links into some of the things we'll talk about later about adoption. But yeah, to summarize, or actually there's some examples here as well. You can have a look at this afterwards. We can share the calculator too. You can build calculators like this quite easily for any type of application. But what we're looking at here is a patentability calculator. We help, and we've had a lot of conversations with customers that haven't had the resource or the time or the ability to run strategic patentability programs to assess all their inventions and which should actually be patented and how likely they are to be patented. If you can now do that If you can automate most of it, if you can have the right people doing it, what impact would that have? And if you have a 10% increase in or reduction rather in the amount of patents you file that are not subsequently granted, or your number of office actions goes down, it's quite easy to come up with a tangible number in most cases when you look at that. So just an example is another example as well, not looking at the monetary value, but if you're trying to measure time, try to break down the different elements, the different parts of doing something in general, and then try to compare the amount of time it takes you to do that in the new tools using AI versus the old methods versus outsourcing it or whatever it may be. So not too hard to do, but it's something that should be done. Saw Shai coming in here as well off camera. Is there a question?
Yeah.
Not about this.
There's a question. What about AI-based findings in patent literature for non-textual elements, such as like chemical structures and codes, biological sequences? Is there, do these tools, are they able to analyze those types of literature?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's harder, right? Whatever is harder for a human is usually harder for an AI too, right? And you get very granular. A lot of it is visual, which means that you have to be able to decipher. And as an AI, you have to be able to decipher and understand a lot of graphical information, chemical structures, and things like that, compounds. So there is a lot of development in the patent space. And for us, we're moving, not creating specific solutions or databases for it, but the general solutions that we're doing with image searching and things like that will certainly help and make it a lot easier. But I also know that some of the dedicated providers in that space, CAS and some of the other ones, are focusing a lot on developing AI solutions for those things specifically. Yeah, a lot happening. Cool. Yeah, moving on very quickly. Just some, skip that through. This is a huge section. You could fill Madison Square Garden and spend a week with data security experts in there, and they still wouldn't agree or cover everything that we're going to try to cover in 5-10 minutes now. So this is really just scratching the surface. But if we go back and think about some of the things we talked about that are preventing people from adopting AI, I think trust and security are two really big things. So there's an element of, security is obviously very effective or important, but also trusting that the security will have a psychological impact. So to me, this is a big section. I would recommend visiting our website afterwards to get some guides on it if this is something you want to do. But one of the main things is that you will be processing data of different sorts, and you need to consider how that data is being safeguarded and stored and used, and by whom and when and where. Security, when you go into an assessment like this, should not be an afterthought. It should be something that you think about from day one, because you could spend months assessing a solution and loving it, but then your IT and information security guys come back and say that actually they're not compliant, so we can't use them. Bring everything together, initial section. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. I'm just going to very quickly and on a high level go through some of the main sections. There are a lot more as well, but some of the main sections that we see. So when you assess something, you can categorize it into 3 different parts, I think, probably more again, but we do it in 3. Data and information security. So how secure is the data that you actually work with in these solutions? Secondly, what is the compliance and the legal aspects around how you process certain types of information? And then thirdly, how is the model being trained? What kind of information is being used? And what's the integrity of how the models are being trained and ownership of data and things like that. So if you look at data and information security, the first thing is usually data encryption and the protection methods. So you need the information to be secure, obviously, when you upload it, when you save it, when you store it, secure both in rest and in transit. And you need to dive into the security protocols that your providers have. And not only theirs, but also their providers, because usually you're looking at an ecosystem of providers that will provide you with the final solution that you're using. Your data guys will know this. You probably know quite a bit of it as well, but it's one of the key things, data encryption and encryption models. In our case, for example, we do have double encryption. So we have encryption on server level, but then also down on user level to make sure that if things are hacked, then a very unlikely event, then it's really hard to do anything with the data that they get. So that is usually very important. And the second element that we're mentioning here is around access control and what kind of protocols the provider offer in this. Access control essentially regulates who gets access to what type of information in the solution within your user base and in general, who owns the key to the locks that unlock different compartments, and what kind of solutions are in place for getting access in general. Logging in, is there multi-factor authentication? Are we using SSO? Other things like that. So depending on what it is that you need to cover and what you need from your internal requirements, make sure that the provider can give you that as well. And hopefully nothing ever happens. But if something happens, if someone is trying to hack something, if there is a data leak or whatever it may be, what kind of incident response protocol does the provider have? How do they make sure that they remedy it and fix the issue? How do they make sure that it's communicated to you if it's critical or non-critical for that matter? All of that is really important, and you need to validate that. First of all, there is an incident response protocol in place, and secondly, that it's satisfactory to you. If there isn't one, I'll be cautious. But yeah, make that part of it. And then there's an element here as well. I mentioned that there's an ecosystem, right? But we're talking about security protocols and technology on user levels and account levels, but we should also be talking about it on the cloud providers. All the information we do, 99.99% is hosted in the cloud. What kind of protocols does the actual cloud providers have? If they're reputable providers, Amazon Web Services or Google or someone like that, they will have a lot of security and they will have all of this in place. So you probably don't have to worry too much about it, but compliance with your own internal and legal policies is important from this perspective as well. And the cheat code here, or one of the cheat codes, is the last bullet point, which is security certifications. If someone has a security certification, ISO or a SOC 1 or 2 or some other type of verification and certification, then you can bet that they are a company that is focused on security and is also checking a lot of the boxes that you would need for the upper part of this checklist. Yeah, try to figure out why or why not a provider has or doesn't have certification. Questions? Hope not, because this is not my field.
We do have one question. Is there a government backdoor required or implemented for US services? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, so it's actually coming up here in the different types of data that you process. And if you look at the second part in compliance and legal, so it's not really about the security, but how do you make sure you're complying with local rules and regulations? There is a lot of local rules. There's GDPR in Europe, there's CCPA in California. There's a lot of specific regulations for certain industries and geographical requirements around that. And there's a lot to say about this, but on a very high level, my recommendation is really sit down and map this out with your data teams and your info security guys, because it is a jungle and they will know it. And like I said, you probably know quite a lot about it as well, but it's very complicated. And the first thing that I would say is around sort of the regulations for personal data in particular. That is something you want to make sure is 100% compliant, both for you and for the providers and the whole ecosystem. If personal identifiable data is being processed and used and shared and stored, then it's definitely something you need to start mapping out. But also for the more unidentifiable and aggregated data. And yeah, second part here would be, if there are, to the question that just came up, are there restricted data types or regulations for geography, for example? Can you have certain data exit the country you're in? And there are data points like that, right? So if you process national interest information that's export controlled, certain type of government funded research, things like that, make sure you stay abreast of what the regulations are for that. And everything you do here is always both looking at external regulations, but also your own internal regulations. Like I said, not going too deep into this, but giving you at least a high-level checklist.
Andreas, people are asking or are interested in learning use cases. Is that part of, I think we can go to that if you have that teed up.
So use cases is really, to me, it's pretty obvious, right? It's what we looked at in the beginning. This is more intended to be a checklist and something that you would go through to assess the fit of the AI solution. Use cases to me are patent search, review, analysis for different reasons, whatever it may be, patent drafting, and enabling R&D, doing more predictive analytics or market assessments, those kind of things. So I wasn't planning on going too deep into it. This was more intended to be a checklist. The final part, just want to make sure we cover this before we exit, is around AI model training. And again, not going into too much depth here, but you should be considering ownership of the data that is going into the AI. This is really crucial. I would argue again that there's a bit of a sliding scale between pre-existing data that you upload and things that you as a user generate within the tool. And then thirdly, what the AI is generating for you, the derivative data or the output from a GenAI solution, for example. And there are no rules or laws around this, really. It's all about what you agree, but you need to figure out what you're comfortable with and what kind of ownership you're expecting from a solution like this. Usually a pretty big negotiation point with larger implementations in this space. Also, the second part of that, the data you generate or upload, is that used to train the models? And are the models general, or are they proprietary to you? What can you accept, what not? In our case, we don't use any user-generated data to general models, but especially some of the free ones out there will do that. That's the way that they charge for it. So figure out what you're okay with doing. We all know what it can mean that unpublished data goes into these solutions, and it can be a fairly big risk, especially as reverse engineering and hacking of these models is becoming a pretty big thing as well. It is possible to go in and try to decipher what information was used to train a model at this point. So think about that and what you allow and don't allow. And then linking to the last part that I was just saying about the sort of hacking attempts and making sure that your data is safe in general, make sure that there are processes and policies in place to safeguard the actual models, not just the data that's in there. And I was talking about certifications previously. There is a new certification for AI developers that's called ISO 42001. That is very new, and I'm not sure how many have actually had the opportunity to be certified in that. But once we get to that, a lot of the integrity questions and ownership questions and the way that you process information will be covered in that as well. So look out for that type of certification. So it gives you a bit of a seal of approval for a lot of it. So I'm rushing through just to make sure we get through this. And I may skip the adoption part here very quickly. I liked this quote. I saw it a couple of weeks ago. We can for sure find and come up with innovation and technology that is solving really big problems, but that doesn't really matter if it's not being used. So change is driven by people and innovation is technology driven. So think about the adoption part. Think about people's attitude towards using these type of solutions. Think about the intangible softer values that you need to cover. And you can see some of these things. You assess demographics and capabilities and look at UI, UX and onboarding support and things like that, but you will get that in the deck. So in the interest of time, I will move over and just summarize. So to me, it is pretty clear, maybe a little bit biased having been in this space, but I've also been on the other side. And I'm pretty sure that AI is the solution to a lot of the problems that we're facing in our space. And I think if we just figure out what our problems are, AI will be able to eventually, if not today, find a solution for it. Take the list that we just provided in different shapes or forms, and make sure that obviously the AI is right for you and that it checks all the boxes, but also take the leap to try and get the right solutions in place. So I have 2 more slides, which is essentially just looking at the future and where we may be going here. So going back to our survey again, we're obviously assessing where we are and where we are with current capabilities and adoption. I think it's interesting to see what people think will happen. And we asked some questions around that as well. And I think we're moving more and more towards automation and autonomous solutions. And I think certain domains or certain processes, certain use cases are closer to that than others. But there's no doubt that some of these processes can be more or less fully automated. And that would be very impactful. And looking at that, some of the more, I wouldn't say easier things. If you look at novelty searching, for example, 75% of the respondents to our survey thought that is something that we will be able to see in the not too distant future. Patent drafting, probably not quite there yet, which is the other big use case. But yeah, for this, it's quite interesting. And just to very quickly explain how we see the world, and this is based on search, obviously, but we're moving from an environment, I think, that is machine-assisted humans to human-assisted machines, and then eventually to full automation of certain tasks. So right now, it used to be that humans did everything from, in our case, searching and defining and reviewing and reading and assessing. Now you can use machines to do some of it, and then eventually they will become more intelligent. You will guide them more, and then I don't know exactly when and how, but eventually you will just ask it to do this and you will get the result that you need. Actionable, hopefully. So yeah, that is more or less what I intended to cover, rushing through it, a lot of it, but I hope it was helpful to some at least.
Great. So let's talk about IP Rally. One of our questions is, does IP Rally offer those 4 automated products yet? Maybe you can give us like an overview of what IP Rally does, and you can get into it a little bit more there.
Yeah. If I scroll back and have a look. So this is what IP Rally does. We are trying to look at where do we have the most impact with the models that we built and the algorithms that we have. And most of them are proprietary. So we built them from scratch over the past 10 years, quite unique. And they're built for the reason or for the purpose of doing the things that we built into the tool. We're not using general models. We're not going in and try to convert from having an old Boolean or semantic search and then try to layer some sort of AI solution on top of it. We're native AI, and everything is flowing from that. So the use cases and where we are, we get quite a lot of feedback from patent and trademark offices we work with and corporate customers, service providers, and they tell us that the biggest noticeable thing that we can help them with is efficiency in search projects and review projects, right? So if you look at any type of patent search, freedom to operate, patentability, invalidity, whatever it may be, we can help and confidently say that we reduce the time in those situations by probably 75, 80% without sacrificing accuracy. And that's obviously a big gain. So I would say for searching and reviewing, it's there. Where we probably need to go moving forward is looking at further automation in that and how the information is digested once it's done. And that's not quite there yet. You still need to process the information and work with it yourself, but we're getting there, I think. And then the other elements that we're looking at here and where we are in our journey is monitoring is by definition automated, right? Define what it is that you want to know, and then we will give you that information. And that is in there. It's got some quite unique aspects to it, some qualitative measures and the ability to classify it into internal taxonomies and things like that. And then that links quite nicely into the final big part of IP Rally, which is classification. So you can use the general AI models, and this may be a good illustration of how the same models can be used for different things and whether you want to consider the data you input. So we never use any user information for training the general models, but you can feed the AI information that help you build local, private, custom-made classification models. So you can train an AI to understand the attributes of what makes up a category X, Y, Z. And then based on that, you can take your 5 competitors' portfolios, map them out, and map them into your own way of looking at the world. So not fully there with 100% automation, probably not going to happen in the next couple of months either, but it's definitely where we're going to end up, I think, in the end.
That was great. Did you start from an open source LLM model and built your foundational model from there, or was it all from scratch?
So it's all from scratch, but we're using general AI. So knowledge graphs, for example, is one of the things that we're using. We didn't invent knowledge graphs. Obviously, it's a way of structuring information, looking at deeper context, and you vectorize it in a way that you can look at a lot of nuance and you can do it very fast. So it's great for machines to crunch massive amounts of data. So we didn't invent that. Google is using it. Amazon is using it. It's everywhere when you want to do that. What we did is we took that concept, we built it out for patents. So we taught the system to look at a description, look at a patent, parse that out, decipher it, and put it into a knowledge graph in a way that makes sense. And that allows you to then describe what it is that you want to have, and then find the information you need in a database of knowledge graph. So it's all proprietary. It's all built. It's actually patented, a lot of it. One of our founders is a European patent attorney. So he's been pretty careful about that, which is great. But yeah, most of what you see in there is proprietary. And the exception to that is when we are building large language models. We don't have any large language models. We will use Claude, for example, from Dropic, and we will then wedge that into the use case that we want to solve. So we wanted to extract intelligence from claim sets. We train it and we prompt engineer it in a way that allows you to do that. And then we wouldn't claim that we own the models, but we force it into our way of looking at the world.
Got it. Can you talk about the types of companies who are using IP Rally? One person is curious about if IP Rally can analyze electronic circuits. So I guess patents of electronic circuits and electronics in general.
Yeah, there's different levels to that question. You can analyze electronic circuit information on different levels. Very briefly, our models are trained on data that covers every single technical domain. And the way that we use knowledge graphs essentially means that the system automatically learns new technology areas as well. So if you are in the electronics domain, one of your competitors starts inventing something new or come up with new concepts and describe them in a certain way, our system will actually learn that and start creating vector spaces for that. So yeah, I would say it works. The models are trained and work for all technical domains, but some areas are more challenging than others that we talked about previously. I wouldn't say electronics is necessarily one of those. I'd say chemicals and those kind of things are a bit more challenging. But for sure, you can search anything. We work with some of the companies you see here and a lot more. If you go to our website, you can see which ones, ranging all the way from life science companies, big and small, to big industrial mechanics companies, to software companies, service providers, patent and trademark offices. If you think of it from the perspective of patent and trademark offices, they will have to run applications and assess applications in every domain. And they use our model for all of it. So it does work. But yeah, the devil's in the detail. What do we mean by deciphering and describing technical or information in different ways?
Got it. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much, Andreas. Unless there's any questions. So slides, a lot of people are asking for the slides. We'll share them afterwards. They'll be put into the slide folder. You'll see them populate, and you can also email info@inhouseconnect.org if you don't see the slides or if you want to get them from there. We'll make them available that way. Andreas, if people want to reach you or connect with you, here's your email, here's your website. A number of people are interested in learning more about IP Rally, so that's great. Thank you, everybody. Folks, if you enjoyed the program, please let us know in the chat. A number of people are saying yes, so that's great. Andreas, any final words before we sign off for the weekend?
No, I feel like I've talked enough. But yeah, no, it's been great trying to put this into some sort of digestible format. And I hope it's been useful. And if anyone wants to take a deeper dive into what we do or discuss some of these topics or get like a more detailed list of some of the considerations to make, then this is where you find us. So appreciate
All right.
it.
Great. Thank you so much. Super useful. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to wrap up here. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thursday, a great weekend,